Hello and welcome to Dr. Poole's SharePoint Surgery. How many apps do I need? A practical approach to Office 365 adoption. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available to you within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Poole, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. Richard heads up the pre-sales team for Harmony across the EMEA and Asia Pacific regions, working both directly with key accounts as well as Harmony's partner channel. Bringing with him 18 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize the significant benefits in productivity that collaborative platforms enable. Before joining Harmony in 2011, Richard worked for Dassault Systems PLM for over 10 years. Richard also has a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. So I think one thing that we wanted to just start off with, is actually just to get an idea of what tools people are actually using in Office 365 at the moment.
So please answer the poll question on your screen. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you everybody for participating in that. So it looks like the majority are both Exchange Online and or SharePoint Online, with Exchange Online being the highest proportion, which is fairly typical of most companies that I speak to. That I think the first step people make when they move to Office 365 is to basically move their email to a hosted platform, which makes most sense. But also I can see that some people are starting to use Teams and some other Office 365 apps as well. So let's take a look at actually some of the kind of challenges that I think a lot of you probably see with moving, like, let's say, completely to an Office 365 environment, because Office 365 is a kind of a combination of different tools and platforms that are all kind of obviously packaged up together, but not necessarily very tightly integrated between them. And this is actually a slide from Microsoft that indicates like when and where people are likely to use which components of Office 365. For example, like if I want to communicate with somebody on a one-to-one basis that's not planned, then typically I'd be using OneDrive for Business, or Skype if I need to get hold of somebody straight away, and obviously email is more a kind of one-to-one type kind of interaction. But as you kind of open that up to groups of users, teams, departments, or across the organization, there becomes lots of different ways to kind of communicate, whether that's using Yammer to kind of post something and share it amongst an organization, or whether that's utilizing things like Teams and SharePoint to actually share content and collaborate around that content together. So it's very difficult for end users to really decide when and where they should be using what tools, and they can all look very different and behave quite differently, whether they're like in a web interface, or whether they're in the kind of like the thick client of even like with Outlook. I can access Outlook in a browser, or I can access Outlook in the traditional kind of thick client on my machine, and they behave a little bit differently. They look quite different, and I think there's different use cases for them. So on that, we'd also like to ask you a second question.
Which of the Office 365 apps are you using most often?
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much again for participating in that. And far and away, the biggest the winner there is email, basically, and that's no surprise. It's the application that people spend most of their time in. It's what most people have been using for many years to communicate both internally and externally with their colleagues, their clients, and things as well. And also even from a personal point of view, it's very natural for people to be using email to communicate. But I think things are obviously changing, and I think it really comes down to also kind of like people's habits, people's kind of approaches to adopting new technologies, and what's kind of natural to them. And I think different generations have different kind of habits of how they work and how they kind of expect to work and communicate with each other. And I think obviously people are moving more towards kind of like let's say a social kind of way of interacting, like you would do in outside of work. I think a lot of people have obviously really moved towards the likes of Facebook and Twitter and communicating in new ways. But obviously, I think across the board, people still do like talking to people and collaborating with each other. So you can see here, I mean, for meeting people in person and collaborating around kind of workspaces, they still kind of apply across the board. So an example of kind of a new platform or a new tool that Office 365 has introduced is Microsoft Teams, which is a great way to kind of share content, share ideas, and communicate with people in a more ad hoc way. But it's just an example really of where it does have its challenges as well. I think for people to really adopt it in the best possible way, everybody in the team needs to actively choose to start using Teams and use a different interface. Teams is available in a browser, but it's also available in its own application as well. And from that application, obviously, you can communicate with people, you can set up meetings, you can have online sessions, and you can subscribe to different channels and attach documents that you want to share and things. So as I say, it is a nice way to share content and collaborate with each other, but it's very difficult to control it because, for example, pretty much anybody can create a team and then add members to that team, and you quite quickly end up being a member of lots of different teams. They could potentially be called the same thing, and it's very difficult to kind of identify between them. So it's a different mindset, it's a different way of working. And I think if everybody really jumps on board and takes it, but takes the bull by the horns, then it can really help. But I think a lot of the time people resort back to how they're working today, which is in their email client, which I think certainly the last poll question kind of confirmed amongst this audience today. So because Outlook is the interface that people spend their time in, wouldn't it be great if you can bring in those capabilities from across Office 365 into the environment that people are spending their time in? And that's really where Harmony fills that gap, because we can bring in SharePoint from a document management point of view. OneDrive from a personal document management point of view, Teams from a kind of shared platform point of view, as well as Skype for Business and Yammer, and utilize things like the Office graph and stuff, all in one single interface that is consistent across those using those different platforms. I can even move and copy content between them, but also it's there, it's at hand, it's easy to use, and it kind of looks, in some ways, if you can make something look familiar to people, they're much more likely to use it. So where it's represented as, for example, like a document library, it looks like a kind of almost like an explorer view, but you've got the capabilities to utilize all of the features of SharePoint in that interface. It's very, very powerful and useful for the end users to really benefit from the platform that is being made available to them. Also, being within the Outlook client, it means that we can actually interact with the emails that you're sending and receiving. Obviously, there's a reason why people are spending their time in Outlook. And it's because email is still the main form of communication. So being able to, for example, send links, capture emails, all those kind of things, all in a single interface is a massive, massive benefit. So let's take a look at how that works in practice. So I'm just going to switch to my Outlook. And as I say, Harmony for Outlook is available as a plugin. So for example, here I can minimize this when I'm not using it. I can also rebrand it, so it doesn't have to say Harmony. It could say Digital Workplace. It could say Office 365. It could say whatever name you may have given to your kind of collaboration platform, which is quite common in lots of companies. Again, that really helps with kind of corporate identity, and if somebody's talking about, I need to get some content into, then it's then we can all be talking about the same thing. But with Harmony, as I mentioned, we can actually connect to all the different areas of your Office 365 platform. For example, I've got some team sites that I'm working in here. I've got some sites that I'm following. I've got my OneDrive. So if I go into my OneDrive here, then I can access all the content that I'm managing in my personal space, and that really helps to move away from that kind of having a folder on your desktop that you've just got file name or whatever to organize by. And from here, I can check in, I can check out, I can even preview content directly from here using Office Online as a previewer. And that also supports things like PDFs and images and videos and things. So again, even just having this as from an end user's point of view means that I can work on my documents directly from here, and I'm not having to switch interface. I'm not having to adopt another web interface, for example. But likewise, I can also go and access in exactly the same way any teams that I'm a member of, or any groups, for example, in Office 365. So here we can see, like I'm a member of a number of groups and a few teams. And so if I go into, let's say, my EMEA team that I'm a member of, then I can see the documents that are shared with that team. I can work on them in exactly the same way from here. I can also see the channels that have been created against that team as well. So, for example, like if we're preparing for a meeting, then we can share some ideas and put that content into that team. And likewise, moving forward into SharePoint as well. So if we take like a little scenario whereby I may have been working on some documentation locally in my OneDrive. So let's say I've got this market research document now. So I can simply copy that document, or cut. I can move, I can copy and things. But also, if I then go into, let's say, one of those teams that I'm a member of, and I want to share this document with somebody, or the other members of my team, I can then go ahead and share that nice and easily and say that I want to paste that document into that folder, and I can rename it at that point if I need to. But also now anybody who has access to that area, i.e. the members of that team, can access that document and start working on it. I can see who it's currently shared with directly from here as well. So here currently it's just shared with the EMEA team and internal users, but I can also go ahead and invite additional people. So maybe if we're actually subcontracting some work as part of this meeting to a partner or something, then I can actually include them in that kind of scenario. As that kind of moves forward, what I can also do is go ahead and do the same thing, but move it into SharePoint. So I think this really helps with maybe I've had some ideas about having a meeting, and then we've shared it with the team, and then we're going ahead and we actually need some final plans and things. So now I can actually take that document again and go into a SharePoint site that I need to use. And here, when I connect to a SharePoint site, Harmony supports the document libraries that I've got access to. It supports the lists and things that I've also got access to. So it might be we've got some project tasks or some links or announcements and those kind of things as well. And Harmony's connecting to SharePoint and Office 365 using standard web services. So everything is fully supported by Microsoft. Everything is fully security trimmed as well. So I only get to see the content I've actually got permission to access. So for example, here, if I now want to save this document into this library, then I can easily just paste that there. And I'll be prompted to choose the content type if I've got different content types defined. Maybe this is a proposed agenda or something. And I have the opportunity to then fill in all the metadata that might be required. So having that kind of single interface between different platforms really helps people to utilize the tools in the best possible way. So not only can I save that content, but also I can tag it with other information. So let's say this is to do with a particular proposal that we're working on or something like that. What I can also do is capture content directly from my Outlook as well. So if we go into, let's say, I'm going to create a new folder here for today's session. And I've actually been sent maybe some emails that relate to a project or some documents. I can capture those easily just by dragging and dropping the content that I need to get into SharePoint, whether those are emails, like we're doing here. And if it's an email, it'll actually be marked in my Outlook as being saved to SharePoint with the location, and also capture all the key information from the email as well, like the subject, who it was sent from and to, etc. Likewise, if I've actually received some documentation by email, I can drag and drop the documents in too, and you'll see that in the same way as we saw before, I can actually go ahead and set the content type and fill in the metadata. I'm just going to save that there. Likewise, I can also take content from my local machine. To get content into SharePoint, Teams, or my OneDrive in the same way. So having that kind of consistent UI and in front of me and at my fingertips whenever I need it is really, really key in getting people to adopt those platforms very, very easily. If I now need to find some content in any of those repositories, then I can simply click in the top of the sidebar to perform a search. So if I need to look for, let's say, anywhere where claim is mentioned, you'll see that it returns obviously the documents in this library that have those keywords that I'm searching for. But also I can open that search up to a wider scope. So if I want to actually find other content across all my sites that I'm connected to, then I can easily get to that as well. And for example, here we can see that I've got some documentation that now I actually want to share with maybe some colleagues or an external party. So if I compose a new email, and send this to one of my colleagues, you'll see that Harmony is available in my email messages as well as my my inbox and things as well. And that really helps because now I can simply drag and drop documents into the emails that I'm sending and actually create and send nicely formatted links to the recipients. Now, in this case, if I'm sending this email to Susan, and if she can obviously receive the link and click on it and open it up from SharePoint. But if she has Harmony, and let's say she's even got Harmony closed at the time, she can just right click on that and say open the link in Harmony, and it will take her directly to that document. So she doesn't have to navigate to it, and she can start working on it from here. So she could preview it, she could see, you know, the version history, who's made it, what changes and why, and really collaborate around the document that I'm actually sending. Now, one of the challenges when you're sending a link is whether the person has access to it, and typically I don't know if Susan has access to this particular document. So when I hit send, Harmony has the ability to actually check whether all the recipients have access to the links that you're sending. If any of them don't have access to any of those links, it will actually prompt me to say who doesn't have access and ask me what do I want to do with that. So I can either grant that recipient access to the document, either view or edit capabilities, and that's utilizing the share capability from Office 365 and SharePoint Online to actually grant access to that individual document. However, if I need to send this document to maybe an external party, and so I need to send it as an attachment, then I can also do that just by holding down the Alt key while I drag and drop the document into the email, and it will create an attachment instead. So it's very natural for the end user to work with both sharing documents as links or attachments, however they actually need to work. Now, we can also find content in a few other different ways as well. So if we just go back to actually where we were working a few moments ago and say, I actually want to filter the views that I'm looking at, because Harmony, as we said before, supports all the different content types that you've got access to and are defined in the libraries, as well as things like views as well. So I can see here, for example, all the emails that have been captured in this particular library because I've got a view defined that's going to filter on that content type, but also display specific columns as well. So like what the subject is, who it was sent from and to, and all those kind of things. And then I can filter by that information as well. So for example here, if I just want to see emails that have been received from, let's say, Karen and myself, then I can create a nicely formatted, filtered view of that particular library. Also, I can filter by different properties as well. So things like using the taxonomy service to filter by tags and terms. So if I just want to see documents that have been tagged as contracts, for example, if I start typing, then valid tags and terms are presented to me. And here I can see that there's just one document that's actually been tagged with that information. Now also, I can find information from my other sources as well. So there's a lot more, obviously, to Office 365 than just SharePoint Online. So if we take a look at the Collage tab in Harmony, what we're doing here is giving you the ability to actually bring those services together and present information in an easy to digest way. So for example here, I can connect to Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Dynamics 365 or Salesforce, for example, Yammer and some other cloud-based services, and also utilize the Office Graph to actually identify topics from the emails that I'm selecting. So in this case, I've just selected this this email from one of my colleagues, Elisa, which is relating to a particular account that she's working on. And so I might want to see where else we've been working with pharmaceutical companies in this case. So because Harmony and Collage have identified some topics from this email, such as the industry and the account name, I can actually see information coming from those other sources and services that have been identified with the same information. So if I just click on pharmaceuticals there, we'll see that there's a number of other documents that have been worked on in SharePoint that have been tagged with the same topic. But it also might be other emails that have been sent around that have been identified with the same topics as well. So it's a nice, easy way to actually find content that's actually in context with the emails that I'm reading. And then we can go ahead and actually utilize those kind of topics to help you to save your content as well. So if I want to save this email, you'll see in the ribbon here, I can choose the location that I want to save this email to, but also Harmony is able to recommend some locations as well based on the topics that it's identified. So for example, because this is identified as with the account name, it's suggesting a library where that account has been used as some metadata. Likewise, where identified pharmaceuticals as the industry, it's suggesting and recommending a location where pharmaceuticals has been used as metadata as well. And when I go ahead and save that email, we can also capture, as well as the header information that we saw earlier, we can also capture the topics that have been identified and then use those as metadata in SharePoint as well. So it kind of like, actually it's almost like a self-driving engine that identifies the topics and then uses them and then finds other places where they've been used. And because I'm tagging it with that information as well, it's really constantly enriching the data and helping me to find relevant and related information. So hopefully that's given you a reasonable idea of how Harmony can really help you to utilize the various areas of Office 365 that you want your users to be using on a daily basis.
Great. Thank you, Richard. So before I go into the questions that people are asking, I'm going to ask a question of our own, which is, are you using Harmony today? And if you are, or only using the free version, would you like to have a trial of the enterprise version that Richard was showing today? And with that, while you're voting, I will look at some of the questions. Are there automatic updates to Harmony? How do I make sure that I'm using the latest version of Harmony?
Okay, so the Enterprise Edition is delivered as a MSI package, which you would typically manage the deployment of yourself within your organization. That's often done with something like Software Center or Landesk or something similar. So obviously, ideally, you want all the users in your organization to be using the same version of Harmony. And so we give you access as the administrator, for example, to download the latest build of Harmony. For example, the current build is 6.6 for anybody who's using Harmony today and maybe using an older version. You can receive notifications of when there's new versions. There's typically kind of one per quarter. and then you can push that version out to your end users. So there's no real need for the end user to kind of think, oh, am I running in the latest version? But more do it in a managed and organized way.
Great, thank you. I have to train my users to use Harmony. Do you have training resources I can utilize besides your website?
Okay. I mean, I think obviously training is a key element. Hopefully Harmony, I think, feedback from most of our customers is that it's very intuitive to use. It's pretty straightforward, and I think that's where we really focus our efforts is making Harmony as easy as possible to use, so that training is the required training is as minimal as possible. Saying that, obviously, it does help if you've got some training material. On our website, there's videos to kind of like short how-to guides. We've got some getting started material. Also, obviously, we can help you to put together training material to actually run with your users, and we typically do that certainly with our enterprise customers to run like a training session that's focused around your environment, particularly like with some of your terminology and your content. If you've rebranded the sidebar as well, then to use that as part of the training. So that's something that we can certainly help you with to really ensure the success of Harmony. But as I say, there is a lot of material already available on our website, as well as on YouTube as well.
Thank you. Do you recommend using Harmony with SharePoint on-premise and Exchange, or should we just wait till we have Office 365?
Good question. So Harmony supports all versions of SharePoint since, I think, WSS 3. So if you do have SharePoint online, SharePoint on-premise today, even if it's an older version, then Harmony supports that. You can work, in the same kind of way that we've been demonstrating today. Obviously, some of the capabilities are Office 365 or SharePoint Online specific, but it really depends on the SharePoint that you're running. But we do connect in exactly the same way. So that really helps end users. If you are moving from an on-premise environment to an online environment, again, the UI in SharePoint changes, from one version to another. In Harmony, they've got the same experience. So, and you can connect to multiple environments in Harmony. So you can connect to both your on-premise sites as well as your new SharePoint Online sites. To really ease that migration of the user kind of adoption of the new platform. But also, because I can connect to multiple, I can actually move content from one to the other using Harmony in kind of typical keyboard shortcuts. So you can select a bunch of documents that you want to get from one environment into another and copy and paste those and then apply the new metadata. Or if you've got corresponding metadata in both environments, then that will come across as well. So it's definitely worthwhile you looking at Harmony in your SharePoint on-premise environment as well.
Thank you. There are a bunch more questions, Richard, but in order to give everybody some time, I think I'm just going to ask a couple more, and the rest we will answer after. Do you need your SharePoint set up a certain way before you implement Harmony with your content types and your meta tags already set up?
Not specifically. If you're just if you want to use Harmony to basically access your content and get content in and share it like we saw today, then you can basically install the client, connect to your environment and start working. There's no specific requirements that you have to have for Harmony to work. There are some things that we do recommend. I mean, for example, if you want to save emails into SharePoint, then we do recommend that you create a specific content type for emails. You can call it what you like, to be honest, but we do actually provide a feature pack that will create that for you if you want, and add kind of email specific columns to that content type as well. But again, you can add that into your own current environment. You can add those columns to an existing content type, and then you can map those using Harmony. So as I say, there's no real must-have for your SharePoint to work with Harmony, but it's just depending on, if you, as I say, if you're using Harmony to capture emails, then there are some recommendations. But again, that's all available on our website. If you go to the support area, there's guidelines and instructions on the recommended content types and metadata and things.
Okay, and if I don't have Outlook, is there a plugin to use for Office 365 Online? Office OWA?
Right, yes, we do have an online app. Sorry, when you said you weren't using Outlook, I thought you were going to say I'm using something, a completely different mail client. So yes, I mean, we do have a browser-based app as well for not only Outlook, but also for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint as well. So actually, if I just open up a browser for a second, I can probably give you a quick look at that. So let's just go to my Outlook in a browser. I'll log in as myself. And if I go to the same kind of mailbox that I was using earlier and take, let's say, one of these emails. Now, obviously, the user experience of Outlook in a browser can be quite different to Outlook as a thick client, as I mentioned before. So, but Harmony does integrate there as well. So it gives me the capabilities to capture emails and capture attachments so that I can get those into SharePoint. So, for example, here, I can take this email that I've selected, save that, and then select the location and map the header information. So, for example, if I want to put this into a particular library or folder, then I can save that into that location. I can, add and create content from there as well. I can search and then save that. But also what I can do is if I want to send a document in a new email, so if I compose a new email here, again, like we did before to Susan, then I can click into the app here and browse for content in SharePoint. So if I go to, let's say, this legal library, you'll see that there'll be a whole bunch of documents that I've got access to. Again, everything fully security trimmed. So now if I want to attach or send a link to this document, I can do that directly from here. So if I just add it as a link, it'll add it into the email itself. Or if I need to add it as an attachment, then it will attach it to the email as well.
Great. You want to show that? You're done. Okay. There are many other questions which we will get in touch with you to answer. Thank you, Richard, for that presentation. As I said, we will send you an email with a link to watch this recorded webinar, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Thank you.